When a country built on military restraint begins reshaping the air balance of an entire region, something fundamental has shifted. Japan now operates 147 F-35 stealth fighters, making it the second largest F-35 fleet in the world, larger than the Royal Air Force, larger than any other United States ally has ever fielded. Beijing has already described this buildup as extremely dangerous. This is not a routine modernization or a symbolic purchase. It is a strategic wager that could alter air superiority across the Pacific, from the Taiwan Strait to the East China Sea. Japan did not simply add new aircraft. It is committed fully to a transformation that changes how it fights, how it deters, and how it would respond in the opening hours of a regional conflict. That shift is exactly what has China watching so closely. The real question is not how many jets Japan owns. It is what those aircraft allow Japan to do that it could never do before, and why that capability unsettles Beijing. For decades, Japan operated under one of the most restrictive defense postures in the modern world. Its constitution limited offensive military power. No aircraft carriers in name, no long-range power projection, no doctrine built around striking beyond its immediate territory. But the strategic environment around Japan did not stand still. China's military expansion pressed steadily against the first island chain, the arc of islands seen by planners as critical to controlling access to the open Pacific. Chinese warships and aircraft began operating closer to Japanese airspace and waters near the Senkaku Islands. Pressure around Taiwan intensified, placing instability within immediate proximity of Japan's southern approaches. Japan's existing air fleet was not built for this environment. Its F-15J fighters were designed for a different era. They lacked stealth, they lacked sensor fusion, they lacked the networking required to survive and fight inside dense missile and radar coverage. Against modern air defenses and fifth-generation adversaries, they were increasingly vulnerable. Japan needed more than a replacement aircraft. It needed a system capable of operating inside contested airspace, sharing targeting data across domains, and shaping the battlefield before shots were fired. That requirement led Tokyo to make one of the most consequential air power decisions in its post-war history. Japan dramatically expanded its commitment to the F-35, turning what began as a modest acquisition into a fleet large enough to anchor regional air operations. And crucially, it did not limit itself to a single variant. A significant portion of those aircraft are F-35B models, capable of short takeoff and vertical landing. That choice signals something far larger than fleet renewal. It points to a future in which Japan can project stealth air power from dispersed bases and sea-based platforms, complicating every Chinese operational plan in the region. This is why the buildup matters. Japan is no longer structuring its air force solely around homeland interception. It is building the ability to contest airspace, deny access, and shape outcomes far beyond its immediate coastline. And that reality is changing the strategic equation in the skies over Asia. Japan was about to do something it had not done since 1945. Operate offensive carriers capable of projecting air power hundreds of miles from its shores. The F-35 is not just a fighter jet. It is what defense planners call a flying sensor node, a platform that fuses data from satellites, ground radar, ships, and other aircraft into a single, real-time battlefield picture. Its stealth design reduces its radar cross-section to roughly the size of a golf ball on most modern X-band radars. That means enemy systems designed to detect conventional aircraft at 100 miles might not see an F-35 until it is within 20 to 30 miles, well inside missile range. The jet's AN/APG-81 active electronically scanned array radar can track dozens of targets simultaneously while remaining electronically quiet. For Japan, this represents a generational leap. The F-35A replaces the F-15J at bases like Misawa and Komatsu in northern Japan, while the F-35B deploys to southwestern bases near Taiwan and contested waters. Unlike the F-15J, which requires long runways and extensive logistical support, The F-35B can operate from short airstrips on remote islands or the decks of Japan's converted carriers. This flexibility is critical. Japan's southwestern island chain, stretching from Okinawa to Yonaguni Island, just 60 miles from Taiwan, features rugged terrain and limited infrastructure. Deploying F-35Bs to these islands turns them into unsinkable forward air bases, each capable of launching stealth strikes or defending against Chinese incursions. But here is where it gets interesting. Japan did not just buy the jets, it is building the entire ecosystem to support them. In 2018, Japan announced it would convert two warships, the JS Izumo and JS Kaga, from helicopter destroyers into full aircraft carriers. These are not small ships. At 27,000 tons fully loaded and 814 feet long, they are larger than some World War II fleet carriers. The conversion required major structural changes. Engineers reinforced the flight deck to withstand the extreme heat of the F-35B's vertical thrust, up to 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, concentrated in a small area. They reshaped the bow from trapezoidal to rectangular, increasing landing spots from 5 to 6 and allowing the ship to carry up to 28 aircraft of various types. The JS Kaga completed its first phase refit in under 18 months, a remarkably short timeline that demonstrates Japan's commitment. By 2025, the first 3 F-35Bs landed at Nutabaru Air Base in southern Japan, marking the beginning of operational deployment. What does this mean in practice? Each Izumo-class carrier can deploy roughly 12 F-35Bs in a combat configuration, supplemented by helicopters for anti-submarine warfare and logistics. That is enough air power to challenge light carrier groups or establish air superiority over contested waters. Unlike traditional carriers that require catapult systems and arresting wires, the F-35B does not need either. It can take off in under 500 feet and land vertically, making it far more flexible in confined or damaged environments. In a conflict scenario, these carriers could serve as mobile forward bases for both Japanese and US Marine Corps F-35Bs, dramatically increasing the number of fifth-generation fighters in the theater. But there is one problem nobody is talking about. China saw this coming. Chinese officials did not hold back. A foreign ministry spokesperson accused Japan of consistently relaxing restrictions and pursuing military buildup, warning that the Chinese populace will not permit it. State media analysts went further, claiming Japan's F-35B deployment at Nutabaru, just 600 miles from Taiwan, was designed to enable surprise attack capabilities. But Beijing is not just complaining, it is adapting. China operates roughly 200 J-20 stealth fighters, its answer to the F-35. While American analysts argue the F-35 has superior stealth and sensor fusion, the J-20 excels in areas that matter in a Taiwan contingency. It is 25% faster, with a top speed exceeding Mach 2 compared to the F-35's Mach 1.6. It carries very long-range air-to-air missiles, potentially the PL-15, with an estimated range of 180 miles, allowing it to threaten tankers, AWACS, and other support aircraft that the F-35 depends on. More critically, China has invested heavily in counter-stealth technology. VHF radars operating between 30 and 300 MHz use wavelengths that resonate with the F-35's physical dimensions, making stealth coatings less effective. While these systems cannot guide missiles precisely, they can detect an F-35's approximate location and cue more accurate X-band radars for engagement. This means the F-35's stealth advantage, so dominant against legacy systems, is significantly reduced in a dense, digitally coordinated environment like China's. The jet does not become obsolete, but it cannot operate with impunity the way it might against less sophisticated adversaries. China is also expanding its military presence across the Taiwan Strait and into the East China Sea. AWACS aircraft now patrol regularly, overlapping sensor coverage from ships, ground radars, and fighter patrols. If Japan deploys F-35s to southwestern islands, they will be operating within range of Chinese land-based missiles and fighter sweeps, The question is not whether Japan's F-35s are capable, it is whether they can survive long enough to matter in a high-intensity fight. Japan is not building this capability in isolation. It is part of a broader defense transformation that includes converting the Southwest Islands into a fortified barrier. Ground self-defense forces are deploying anti-ship missile batteries, air defense systems, and intelligence units across islands like Miyako, Ishigaki, and Yonaguni. These positions sit 150 to 300 kilometers apart, creating overlapping fields of fire that would force Chinese ships and aircraft into kill zones during a Taiwan crisis. The U.S. Marine Corps is deeply involved. The 3rd Marine Expeditionary Force, headquartered in Okinawa, is adopting the Expeditionary Advanced Base Operations concept, essentially turning small island outposts into temporary forward bases that can host fighters, missiles, and logistics in contested zones. Japanese officials recently suggested that Japan might intervene militarily if China blockades Taiwan, calling it a survival-threatening situation. That statement is unprecedented. For decades, Japanese leaders avoided explicit commitments to defend Taiwan. Now, Prime Minister Takaichi is signaling that Japan sees Taiwan's security as inseparable from its own. Japan is also constructing a dedicated F-35 training facility on Meijishima, a remote island in the Ryukyu chain, set for completion by 2030. This base will serve as a joint US-Japan training hub, allowing American pilots to practice alongside their Japanese counterparts. It is another piece of the puzzle, building interoperability so that in a crisis, both forces can operate seamlessly. Here is the part that kept planners up at night. All of this depends on Japan's ability to sustain operations under fire. F-35s need fuel, munitions, spare parts, and maintenance. If Chinese missiles knock out key bases or supply lines, even the most advanced jets become grounded metal. So, can Japan's F-35 fleet change the balance of power in the Pacific? The answer is yes, but only if it is used as part of a networked, multi-domain strategy. Alone, 147 F-35s cannot overwhelm China's layered defenses or its growing J-20 fleet. But integrated with US forces, ground-based missiles, naval assets, and allied intelligence, they create a nightmare scenario for Beijing's military planners. Every island with an F-35B becomes a potential launch point. Every converted carrier becomes a mobile threat that is hard to track and harder to neutralize. Every sortie forces China to commit more resources to defense, stretching its advantages thin. Here is what you need to remember. First, Japan has crossed a strategic Rubicon. By fielding offensive carriers and projecting air power beyond its immediate borders, it is signaling that the post-war era of passive defense is over. This is not just about hardware. It is about doctrine, intent, and political will. Second, China's countermeasures are real. VHF radars, long-range missiles, and overlapping sensor networks mean the F-35 stealth is not a magic shield. Japan will have to operate in contested, high-risk environments where losses are inevitable. Third, the timeline matters. Japan plans to complete its F-35 procurement by 2027, with full operational capability shortly after. That is also when Tokyo aims to nearly double its defense budget to $68 billion. The next 3 years will determine whether this transformation succeeds or becomes another expensive bet that fails under the pressure of real conflict. The question now is not whether Japan will deploy the F-35 in its southwestern islands. That threshold has already been crossed, with stealth fighters tied into new bases, upgraded airfields, and converted carriers positioned along the arc from Kyushu down through the Ryukyu chain. The real uncertainty is whether this growing web of F-35 power will make Beijing think twice about any move toward Taiwan, or instead convince Chinese planners that they must act sooner before Japan's defenses and alliances are fully locked into place. Taiwan remains the most likely flashpoint because it sits at the center of both countries' strategic calculations. If China ever moves to blockade or invade the island, Japan's F-35s would not be a distant backup force. They would be among the very first assets tasked to contest the airspace, strike maritime targets, and feed targeting data to Allied ships and missiles. In those first critical hours, everything would hinge on whether these jets can slip through Chinese surveillance, blind or confuse command networks, and keep even a thin layer of air superiority alive long enough for American reinforcements and additional Allied assets to surge into the fight. If they succeed, the cost and risk to Beijing could skyrocket, potentially forcing Chinese leaders to reconsider escalation. If they fail, China could gain rapid dominance around Taiwan and push Japan and the United States into a far more desperate, reactive posture. Beijing understands how central this opening phase would be. Tokyo understands it as well. That is why both sides are not just buying hardware, but racing to refine doctrines, practice joint operations, and shape the battle space before a shot is ever fired. Each trying to ensure that if a crisis comes, they are the side that is ready first. Support the channel by liking and sharing this video, and subscribe to stay informed about the next wave of technological innovation.